Good evening. My name is Leslie Kuhn and I am the president of the League of Women Voters of Newcastle. I'd like to welcome you and our candidates to the Candidates Forum for the Chappaqua Central School District Board of Education. There are 4 candidates running for 2 seats in the election to be held next Tuesday, May 20th. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan, grassroots political organization of women and men. This means that the League does not support or oppose one candidate or political party over another. We are dedicated to the active and informed participation of citizens in government at all levels. The League works to educate voters, increase understanding and debate on major policy issues, and influence policy through education and advocacy. The League takes positions on policies, not on candidates or parties. You can find information about the League, including how to join and support our work, at our website. Our website also has a page dedicated to this election, including an online voter's guide containing information submitted by the candidates on the ballot. We are pleased that all 4 candidates for the 2 open seats on the CCSD BOE are participating in tonight's forum. There is 1 open seat on the Chappaqua Library Board of Trustees. Pam Moskowitz is running unopposed and so is not participating in tonight's forum, but you can find her information in the online voter's guide. Tonight's forum is an opportunity for voters to hear from all the candidates about topics of interest to the community. We thank the many community members who submitted questions to our questions committee. The committee worked hard to sort those questions into topics of interest and to compile a set of questions from those submissions to cover as many of those topics as possible. We hope that the candidates' answers to the questions posed will help educate voters about the candidates and their positions. We urge anyone with additional questions to seek out the candidates individually. This evening's proceedings are being taped by Newcastle Community Media Center and are being live streamed on Zoom and on YouTube. Thanks to Freedom for being here this evening to facilitate. A video will be available on demand at nccmc.com and through a YouTube link. All other recording is strictly prohibited. We also ask that any public sharing or rebroadcast of this forum be in its entirety and unedited. We also ask those of you in the live audience to be mindful that the recording microphones are very sensitive and will pick up any sounds from the audience, so please no whispering. Thanks to our timekeepers tonight, Greeley students and League interns Madison and Kira. Many thanks to our moderator for this evening, Doug French. Doug is a former mayor of the city of Rye and past president of the League of Women Voters of Rye, Rybrook, and Portchester. He currently serves on the Westchester County Board of Ethics and has been moderating for the League for 4 years, including for us last year at this very forum. Doug will now go over the ground rules for tonight's forum, and then we will begin.
Great, thank you, Leslie. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be back here again. This is a very well-run operation. Leslie runs a tight ship. In fact, her email address says president, so I know when I get the email, I have to respond. Okay, so ground rules. We pre-selected by order of opening statements, and it's going to go from your left to right, starting with when we decided to use first names. So Ryan, Allison, Hillary, and then Tim. Closing statements will go in a reverse order. Questions, when we ask questions, it'll start again. First question with Ryan, and then when we get to the second question, we'll start with the second candidate and so forth in cascading fashion. No comments of a personal nature or abusive nature will be permitted. I don't expect to see that. Each candidate has 1.5 minutes for opening statement. They'll have 1.5 minutes for each answer, and then 1.5 minutes for the closing statement. Each candidate gets 2 rebuttals, 30 seconds each. After all the answers have been done for each question, they can raise their hand. And I will call on them for a 30-second rebuttal. There will be no questions submitted from the audience. Those have already been submitted from the public, so we're not taking questions from the audience. And in the closing statements, I will reserve the right to allow somebody to use their rebuttal, only if it's directed at them in somebody else's closing statement. I'll decide that, but we'll see how that goes. So we have 4 candidates, and as I said, we've drawn by names, left to right. I do want to thank the candidates. Raising your hand to serve the public is admired, so good luck to all of you. But this is where it all starts. When we talk about good governance and good community governance, it all starts with people running in local elections, so thank you. So with that, we will start with opening statements, and I'll turn to Ryan. You have 90 seconds.
Okay. Thanks to the league. Is this on? Working? Oh, not on.
No.
So maybe not starting just yet.
Ryan, you might,
It is on.
it's on, tap it, maybe it's on.
Okay, maybe now. Okay, terrific. Thanks to the league for organizing us and to my fellow office seekers for your interest in serving our schools. For the past 3 years, it's been my privilege to serve on the board, including this year as the president. The statements I make tonight, however, will be in my personal capacity. I've lived in Chappaqua since 2015, along with my wife Meredith and our children, who both went to Roaringbrook and then Bell and Greeley now. I grew up in Oregon, where my father was a math teacher. And my summer jobs growing up were changing fluorescent light bulbs and painting walls and waxing floors. So I have a good sense of what it's like to maintain the world-class facilities that we have here in Chappaqua. I'm a former university administrator and faculty member. I taught education design courses to pre-service teachers. I also taught science to undergrads. These days I'm working in educational research, work with a lot of philanthropy and nonprofits offering grants and technical assistance to colleges to help them better serve students. So I have a good sense for what colleges are looking for in our graduates. And I'm running again because I want to continue to use my expertise to support our district team and our community in our collective effort to continuously improve our schools at all levels. Over the last 3 years, I've learned firsthand that institutional knowledge and experience matter, and I feel like I've just gotten started, having done 3 years when it takes a good year or so to just get familiar with the role. So there's lots more to do. I'm sure we'll get into it with the questions later tonight, so thanks for attending and watching.
Great, thank you. Opening statement, Allison, 90 seconds.
Good evening, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum. My name is Allison Steinbauer. I'm mom to 3 boys, ages 11, 9, and 5, who attend Roaringbrook and Bell, with our youngest excited to start kindergarten in the fall. My husband Adam and I moved to Chappaqua in 2014 and have loved being part of this community. I have a bachelor's in communications and a master's in special education. I taught in integrated co-teaching classrooms for 7 years, working closely with families, writing and implementing IEPs, and collaborating with teachers and support staff to reach students of every level. I've been involved in the PTA since my oldest was in kindergarten. They reeled me in with that kindergarten book pack committee. I served as vice chair at Roaringbrook 2 years ago and chair last year. During that time, I served on the interview panel to help select our new assistant principal, participated in many principals' coffees, and helped bring many programs to life. This year, I had the opportunity to serve as a parent member on the Board of Education's Communication Committee while staying active in the PTA. Tonight, you'll hear me talk a lot about listening. A wise friend recently spoke to me about the power of a beautiful question. Big but practical questions that can shift our thinking and help spark real change. That's why I'm running for the board, to ask those questions, to support the great work that's already happening, and look closely at where we can do better.
Great, thank you. Billy, 90 seconds, opening statement, when you're ready.
Good evening. Thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting this candidates night. I'm Hillary Grasso and I'm running for re-election to the school board. All statements tonight are as a private citizen. Before running for the school board in 2019, I practiced education law with a focus on special education law for 15 years. I also served as an adjunct professor at St. John's School of Law for roughly a decade, teaching both education law and special education law. I'm running again because there are initiatives that I'd like to see further along, including world language on the elementary level and improvements in special education. Early on in my tenure on the board, we had a district-wide audit of special education, something for which I pushed as a board member. Not surprisingly, the audit uncovered both strengths and weaknesses within our program, and we've worked to address those weaknesses. For example, when I joined the board, there was no resource room available in the middle schools. Now there is. We've restructured AIS to move it into the school day and are adding a therapeutic support program at the middle level, which dovetails with the district's commitment to mental health and our new partnership with Northwell Health. We've also had a return to robust fundamentals education since I've joined the board, putting into place a phonics curriculum as well as a renewed commitment to handwriting and grammar instruction. I would like to see this expanded. Candidly, these are skills my own 7th grader missed due to COVID, and I strongly support the enhancement of these fundamental skills in the classroom. We need to make sure we are balancing the technological skills our kids will need as adults with the actual skills they need to use that technology. I believe with so much uncertainty in the world right now, we need stability and experience here on the board.
Okay, that's it, thank you. Thank you, Hillary. Tim, you will not with the same 9 seconds.
Hi, my name is Tim McNamara. I am a husband. I'm a father to 3 young girls. I am an ASO soccer coach. I'm also a Horace Greeley alum. I have a bachelor's in computer science from Cornell University, and I have a degree master's from the Naval Postgraduate School in Organizational Leadership and Management. I'm also a chief in the FDNY. I'm in my 21st year of service. I'm running for the Board of Education because I want to maintain the quality of education in our school district and make sure we continue to attract and retain the amazing teachers who will help our children lead authentic and fulfilling lives. I want our children to think critically and to love learning. I want to preserve a district culture that welcomes curiosity and that values the expertise of our faculty. I want a Board of Education that conducts thorough and transparent evaluation of our district's performance towards specific goals that are related to our strategic objectives, so we can see all the areas where we excel, we can see where we can improve, and so that our community can trust that our district's processes are fair and neutral. As a chief in the FDNY, my job is organizational management. That means listening to stakeholders, looking at all issues through an organizational lens, and asking very specific questions that can be used to assess and drive performance towards our mission.
Great, thank you all. I'll now move to the question period. We got 10 questions, we'd like to get through them all. I think we will. We'll start with Ryan. First question, 90 seconds, is what do you do or will you do as a board member to maintain independent views and critical analysis while working so closely with school district administration?
Read it one more time?
Sure. What do you do or will you do as a board member to maintain independent views and critical analysis while working so closely with school district administration?
So I think this question is getting at issues we've seen in the district where some parents admittedly want to protect their child from having to engage with material that they might disagree with. And I think one hallmark of a Greeley experience, speaking with the older grades here in particular, is that we want to put challenging material in front of our students and have them learn to encounter it, analyze it, develop a perspective about it, and not shy away from that. And so in working with the district leadership, coming up with ways within the curriculum to ensure that that happens. And then also to match that, we put a policy in place here in the last 2 years to focus on neutrality. Sometimes districts get tested with needing to have, taking a stand about a particular viewpoint of something happening in the world. And that invariably in a diverse community like ours creates some uncomfortableness for other members when the district makes a statement standing with one or another group. And the neutrality policy, which I helped to devise and support, helps to guide the district in making sure that we allow all viewpoints to be presented in the school. We're a public school, we welcome people from all different backgrounds, and it's important that we find a way to maintain that going forward.
Okay, thank you. Allison?
I'm gonna take in a little different direction. So I think in terms of that question, it's how can the board make sure they're asking really important questions of the district, specifically surrounding the budget. The board's job is to take the needs and the wants of our stakeholders first and see how we can make informed, thoughtful decisions, not emotional or reactionary ones. I think listening is essential. Parents who kind of speak up are advocating for their kids, and we need to make sure that we listen to the things that they're saying and how we can then take it to the district and in terms of the budget, figure out how we can do things like not go over the tax cap, and fit the things that they want within the budget.
Okay, thank you. Allison, same question?
Hillary.
Hillary, would you like me to reread it?
No, thank you. I guess I heard the question about independent views as addressing ours as Board of Ed members vis-a-vis the administration, and hopefully that's the question the asker meant to ask. And I would say I know that there's a perception, and this was true long before I joined the board, that the BOE can be a rubber stamp for the administration, and I assure you that this is simply not true. And many of the issues where there is pushback come to us from unique experiences of children and families that elucidate things that maybe should be working differently in the district from how they are. Because we are an oversight entity, we address those concerns through policy and through policy changes. There have been a lot of policy development and editing over the past few years, and I think that as a district we're stronger for it. That coupled with budget priorities are how we govern the district. And we've tried to bring more of those discussions forward to the public over the last couple of years through work sessions, through increased communications. But it really, I think that independent views on the board are always respected among the board. And in terms of the board vis-a-vis the administration, I assure you that they exist. But a lot of those conversations happen around private topics to private families, and then we address them through policy. So policies such as the neutrality policy and many other policies that you've seen come forward and be edited over the past few years are to exactly address those discussions.
Okay, well, thank you. Tim?
Yeah, the organizational structure that bifurcates the oversight responsibility in a board and separates it from your operations leaders, in this case our superintendent, is a structure that is very important to drive organizational success. So in the FDNY, we have a similar setup. We have a commissioner who acts essentially as our board, and then we have our chiefs of department who implement our operations. And having that separation is very important because the role of the board, the oversight, is really to be operating at the strategic level, thinking about establishing our values, establishing our strategic objectives, and then not getting involved as much as possible in the day-to-day choices, but instead establishing evaluation criteria for how we're going to actually assess if our superintendent is accomplishing the goals that we've set out. And I've seen in the fire department, we've had some commissioners who were previous fire chiefs. They had some trouble sometimes because they would try to get too involved in the work that they were supposed to be managing and then have trouble having an objective view to actually evaluate the effectiveness of the person they're supposed to be supervising. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, candidates. Question number 2, and Allison, we'll start with you. Do you believe that the current practice around public comments at board meetings is effective? Is there a better model to facilitate communication between the Board of Education, district administration, and district families?
I think there's definitely a place for public comment at the board meetings. I don't think that's something that should go away. But I do think that there needs to be other avenues for people who are not comfortable speaking in that forum. I know the board had done office hours last year, which are, I don't think they're continuing, but I think accessibility to the board should and would look different depending on each member of the board. As the chair of the Roaring Brook PTA, I found that listening and asking thoughtful questions in smaller groups was the best way to kind of learn what the community wants and kind of come to a thoughtful decision together. So I would encourage more of that, kind of finding ways that aren't just at the time where everyone is reacting to something that's gone on, where people can be more thoughtful and careful with their words and their emotions.
Great, thank you. Hillary?
So public comment is a mixed blessing, right? Like I think what people don't always understand is that we are running a meeting in public that is subject to the open meetings law. So once we have a public forum like public comment, we have to be viewpoint neutral. So over the years, we've looked into what are our options with public comment. The first option is have none. We've decided that's not a good option. The second option is that you can limit public comment to only issues that are on the actual agenda and people have to speak to that. But we've decided as of now that feels much more limiting than we feel comfortable with, and that we want to have a forum for the community to be able to speak with us. That said, there are many other forums for the community to speak with us, and we've been experimenting with those over the past few years. As Allison noted, we had office hours last year. Success varied. This year we've tried to have coffees in each building with building leadership, with the superintendent, with board members. And so those are the more structured formats for interaction. But over the 6 years I've been on the board, I can't tell you how many families I've spoken to just casually over the phone, in the supermarket. People have reached out over email. Every one of us on the board is always happy to talk to any parent who has an issue, whether in a group setting, whether one-on-one, whether over the phone. I've spoken on Zoom. So whereas public comment seems to have its issues, we are all certainly very accessible.
Yeah, so I believe it is certainly necessary to have a medium by which our community can sort of speak on the record related to school district issues. But unfortunately, my impression recently has been that, over the last few years, has been that it's the last resort, has become the last resort for residents who have been frustrated and felt that they weren't able to engage in the dialogue that they would have liked to with the board, which is challenging really because of the open meeting laws and the quorum rules around the board. I think that the indicator of a really healthy school district where the board was very receptive and the community felt that they were able to speak freely with the board and communicate their ideas would be that essentially nobody would show up to public comment. I would like to see a district in which if a resident brings a good question to a board member and the board member says, that's a good question, I'd like to see it on the agenda at an upcoming board meeting to be discussed in full, in open by all 5 board members, and not just that one meeting, maybe over 2 or 3 meetings, so that other community members can hear the debate and discussion amongst the board members, can give additional feedback so that the board can really hear from our community, which is one of our most important stakeholders.
Thank you. Ryan?
Well, Hillary already explained a lot of what the board's been doing over the past few years, so I don't think I need to reiterate that, except to say that I found it similar to Hillary's experience in that the best time for dialogue is not during the public meeting. It's in small group or one-on-one conversations with community members where we really can have an open back and forth. And again, it's just the limits of the open meeting law that prevents us from being able to do that during the public comment period of a business meeting of the board, where public comment serves as a chance for the public literally to comment on the business of the board, not for a back and forth. So we continue to reiterate and, as Hillary said, experiment with different methods for people to engage with us, whether that be in public events that are happening or arrangements that are made by appointment. I found the coffees to be a little bit difficult because we would often find ourselves getting into tight conversations about individual parent situations that couldn't be resolved in that moment, and that the parent coffees that were done at the building level right now, to me, have been the most effective way for people to raise their concerns within that kind of format. And the next step for us is to come up with a similar way to do that for people who aren't parents but are nonetheless community members and need a way to interact with us as well.
Thank you. We'll move to our third question, and we'll start with Hillary. The school budget failed to pass last year. What can we learn from that, and what should we consider moving forward? Specifically, what would you do as a board member to ensure the budget presented on the ballot each year is attuned to the priorities of the community?
It was a learning experience. It was an uncomfortable learning experience. One thing we learned from it is that this community does not want a non-tax compliant budget. So that was the first takeaway. There was a lot of feedback we received after the fact, saying, it wasn't because of any one issue, it was just because it was over the tax cap, and then other opinions were it wasn't because it was over the tax cap, it was because of specific items in the budget. My feeling is that the more feedback we get from the community during the budget process, the better. And there are years that we get a lot of feedback, and then there are years we get almost none. We know that there are certain priorities that remain consistent among our community members. We know that our families with children in the schools prioritize small classes, and that's something that we've taken very seriously, and we've kept the classes quite small in this year's budget. We also know that our families prioritize keeping their taxes low because this is a very expensive community and it only gets more expensive every year. But the more feedback we can gather from our community members and encourage people to come to our meetings and encourage people to send us emails, we read all of them, we listen to everything. And so the more community feedback we have, the more we're able to understand what people's priorities are and prioritize them.
Thank you.
Regarding last year's budget, in speaking with residents before, during, and after that process, what I heard so frequently really as the underlying reason for so many people who voted against it was that they didn't trust that our budget, that their money was being spent judiciously to further the core education mission. And I certainly agree that I don't think I've seen enough justification, enough scrutiny of aspects of our budget to be able to confidently say it is. I'd like to see many more specific questions from our Board of Education to our administration, scrutinizing certainly our non-instructional budget, administrative support, facilities. I'd like to see how much money we're spending on consultants every year. I'd like to see how much money we've spent in legal fees every year. That's an important thing for an organization to track. I'd also like to see us tracking, our board evaluating the efficacy of even previously enacted instructional programs to evaluate, are they achieving our district's desired goals? If they are, great. If not, we should modify those programs, or if they don't seem to even be suitable to modify to get, positive results, we should terminate those programs and reallocate those funds elsewhere.
Okay, Ryan?
I similar experience to Hillary on the board in the sense that it was clarifying to hear from the community last year really loud and clear. They weren't going to support a budget that went over the cap. And I don't know that we have the ability to really analyze exactly what the objections were to particular issues that might be in that budget, but nonetheless, it was the clearest signal we'd had, and contrasted with some of the public advocacy that had been done at the same time leading up to the budget. So that's a message to the board that, you know, there are silent members of the community who have strong feelings. They may not be willing to come to a board meeting to share them, but they'll make sure that we hear at the ballot box what's gonna happen. So I think all of us on the board know that going forward, and I think you'll see that reflected in the budget for this year. The realization that people need to have about the budget is a lot of it's not changeable. And so because it's a human capital endeavor with multi-year contracts for a lot of people, we have to do our job to negotiate those very carefully to make sure that they don't get out of our control in subsequent years. Of course, things like the cost of healthcare and inflation affect those things, and we have to keep the human operation going in the clearest way possible, and then look for those savings in the form of grants in connecting to our districts nearby via something called the BOCES sort of shared services work that we do that allows for cost sharing for certain common items that most districts get. There's a way to do that smartly going forward, and I'm committed to doing that.
Okay, thank you. Allison?
So board members are fiduciaries for all taxpayers, and I think the community really came out to say last year that they didn't feel like we were asking, or the board was asking those like critical questions of all of the items in the budget. I think it's really important that we look at it with a critical eye and prioritize student-facing positions that are gonna help the whole child. Making sure we're not going over a tax cap for things that are not doing so. There wasn't enough questioning last year, and it pitted two, you know, very strong topics against each other and created a lot of divisiveness in the community. And I think the only way, you know, to stop that from happening is, you know, like everyone else up here agrees, really looking at the budget with a critical eye, questioning it, seeing where we can make those changes and what programs aren't working and what positions, you know, maybe don't need to be continued, or how we can allocate funds elsewhere.
Okay, thank you. Question number 4, and Tim, we'll start with you. Given consideration to current economic uncertainty, inflation, and the district's debt load, what should be the financial priorities for the district?
I think the financial priorities for the district should be maintaining our core education experience for all of our students, and also making sure that we continue to attract and retain faculty who teach our students. It is, you know, make sure we maintain class sizes. And as we look at, you know, so many times there are many wonderful suggestions for additional programs to add to expand our educational offerings. But as the question, you know, implies, over the past 10 years really, our expenses have grown as fast as, or in some cases faster than, our budget. So when there are asks for additional programs, I think we always have to evaluate where that money is gonna come from. And it should not come from our core education experience by either growing class sizes. I don't believe it should come from our traditional arts experience that has been in place for decades. If we do need to find additional money to add new programs, we should be scrutinizing, again, non-instructional or evaluating programs for essentially poor performing programs that can then be cut that are not part of the core educational experience.
Okay, thank you. Ryan, we'll come back to you.
So yeah, kind of picking up from where I left off on the prior question, you know, there's some things to do. One that's on my mind with the facilities is making sure that we build in maintenance for the upkeep of our facilities into the regular year-over-year budget. So we're not putting pressure on the community to have to do frequent bonds that require an additional investment from community members in order to maintain the facilities that we've got. there's a time and place for bonds, but let's try to do better is a point that we've made to the district team in resolving those year over year kinds of upkeep. Connected to that is smart infrastructure investments, like making smart choices about where we can get the best bang for buck for things that we're gonna have to pay for and then hopefully smartly maintain over many years. The other thing that's on my mind is given the unpredictability with federal and state funds right now, we need to make sure that we're protecting ourselves from any loss of funds that trickle down to us as a local district. As you well know, most of our funding comes from local taxpayers, but some money comes from the state and from the Fed. And so one thing that we've been directing the district to do is to make sure that core program work is funded by local taxpayers so that if we lose some federal or state funds, that we can then use that, use our fund balance to help cover the essential things that we need to. But having a healthy fund balance is also an important element of a strong budget that we've worked hard at and have been able to max out this year.
Okay, thank you. Allison?
So I think that some of the priorities that we should make sure are we're retaining and hiring top tier educators. I also think it's gonna be really important to prioritize special education. Obviously, there's a lot going on in the federal government, and while I know that our district gets a small amount of funding, federal funding, at least it's my understanding, for special ed, we should be making sure that our programs are rooted in differentiation for all of our learners and really looking critically at those programs, like academic programs, and make sure that they're going to help all of the children in our district, and also, maintaining the innovative work that the district's doing, whether that's through building or programs and whatnot.
Awesome, thank you. Question number 5, we'll start.
I think
I
Hillary
get
did get a chance to answer.
Sorry.
Hillary, go ahead.
Simply the financial priorities for the district should be those that impact kids and improve learning outcomes. The simplest way to do that is people. People have always been and should continue to be our financial priority. They are 3/4 of our budget is people and benefits, because the people teaching our kids are the most important part of our learning outcomes. The other thing we need to make sure we're doing is maintaining our facilities. As anybody who has a house knows, if you don't maintain it, it will ultimately cost more. So it's important for us to make sure that we're focused on the upkeep of our facilities. And to echo Ryan, it's also about our fund balance and preserving the financial health of the district so that, first of all, when we do need to borrow, we're borrowing from a place of economic stability and good bond ratings. But also because, especially right now in this time of a lot of uncertainty, especially on the federal and state level in terms of funding, we need to make sure that we can craft a budget that's insulated against that uncertainty, especially, as Allison noted, in special education and places where we have real obligations to our students that we want to make sure we're meeting, and we don't know if there's going to be problems with our funding sources. So that's something that we've really asked the administration to focus on, is creating a budget that is insulated against uncertainty, and I think they've done a really good job with that this year.
Doug, I'd like to use my rebuttal.
Sure.
Sure. I am concerned to some extent about the financial well-being of our district because of our fund balance, which has actually depleted over the last 7 years. A healthy fund balance, which is the savings account for a district to essentially cover us in case unexpected things happen. A healthy district should have 20% of their budget in their fund balance. In 2018, we had 19%, our fund balance was 24 million, which was equal to 19% of our budget. Today, it's only 13%. And next year is projected to be the same. The difference there is $10 million, and I have not seen a detailed accounting of what happened to that money and what we're doing to arrest that depletion.
May I use your?
Yeah, go ahead, you go ahead, Hillary.
Okay, so Hillary 30 seconds and then Ryan 30 seconds.
If needed.
So the depletion occurred during COVID because we used down a lot of our fund balance to keep our schools open when most schools in the area were closed and our children were in school. Since the time that we've been able to be back in school and back to business as usual, we have restored our fund balance. There are statutory limits on how much money is allowed to be in your fund balance. And as of this budget, we are at the statutory maximum and we have completely restored our fund balance and anticipate AAA bond ratings when we go out for bonds.
I'd like to, do you still want yours, Ryan?
We can't do double rebuttals,
Sorry.
Karen.
We don't
Yeah,
never had.
you had your one rebuttal. If you wanna pick that up in your
Yeah,
closing
yeah.
statement, you can
Yeah,
do
yeah.
that.
Okay.
I would have said exactly the same thing, so I won't use mine.
Okay. Okay, question number 5, and apologies, Hillary, I kept checking and I thought.
It's okay, don't worry about it.
Just an active pen. Question number 5, Ryan, we'll start with you. If elected, would you advocate for revisiting the discussion about the need for school resource officers in every school, or was that debate settled through last year's budget vote?
Alright, one thing to remember about school safety is it's a whole system of approaches. Officers are only one piece of that. We know automatic door locks, software that supports those things, single point of entry, good procedures, good drills, many other things we shouldn't talk about in a public forum are really effective at helping us deter anything that's a safety concern. In talking with principals, they like the model we have now, where we've got one officer stationed at Greeley and 2 that rotate. And I'm comfortable supporting that because I trust them in the, again, examples of things that I prefer to not talk about on video, where those officers were really handy and helpful to us. And so to me, this is about preserving what we've got, not about expanding it. I think the community was pretty clear about going beyond the tax cap, and the only way right now to fund additional officers would be to go above the cap unless we took from core education program resources, which I'm not comfortable supporting. So unless there's another funding source to revisit this, my advice to the district at this point with this topic is to let the status quo play out for a while and let's see how it evolves over time.
Thank you. Allison?
So I don't necessarily agree that it was settled by the budget vote last year. I think, like I previously said, it was a very divisive issue included in going over the tax cap. Student safety is obviously a non-negotiable and should be approached comprehensively. And that is not limited to SROs. There, like Ryan said, there are lots of wonderful ways that we're keeping our children safe in the schools. The addition of, the locked doors, we have guards, there's all sorts of things that can help with safety in our schools. But I do think if we're hearing from community members that SROs are something they want, it's not something that should be in the tax cap, it should not be something that goes over the tax cap in my opinion, but it is something that, should constantly be looked at as a potential option.
So yes and yes, I've been pretty vocal about my support for the SRO program. I would personally support SROs in every school. That said, I don't believe they should be funded from the pedagogical budget, and that's our only option at this point. We have continued to make a number of security improvements, including the Greeley guardhouse that's in this year's budget that addresses some of the concerns around Greeley being a more open campus, as well as many other enhancements that I don't feel comfortable discussing publicly, but would be happy to speak with anybody about. That said, I will continue to advocate, as we have been advocating, for security expenses to be much better aided by New York State, and for them to be potentially exempted from the tax cap either for the school district budget or frankly for the town budget, because the SROs are a shared service between the town and the school district, and ultimately for something like 95% of residents, it's all taxes, right? Whether you're paying your town taxes or you're paying your school taxes, these are tax-funded positions to keep our children and our faculty and our staff safe. So I will continue to advocate for more funding, for creative funding, and for potential exemption from the tax cap for the SRO program.
Tim?
Yeah, could you repeat the
Sure.
question?
If elected, would you advocate for revisiting this discussion about the need for school resource officers in every school, or was that debate settled through last year's budget vote?
And we need to be always thinking about security of our schools and security of our students every year. I do certainly agree that I would never cut teachers to add additional school resource officers. But we always need to be evaluating our security interventions and evaluating their efficacy and doing what we can to make them as effective as possible. As regards to school resource officers, when I think about, community support, community opinions on them, certainly mixed, but the concerns were regarding, effectiveness. Will they do what we want them to do in an active shooter incident? Will they be safe in our schools? Is there a danger? And what kind of social interactions will they have with their students? And in all of those cases, I would have liked to see, and would still like to see our district go beyond just the SRO qualification, which in my mind is the bare minimum. There are higher levels of emergency response training, which most of our Newcastle police officers have, and I know that Chief Carroll is committed to continuing, but there could also be additional trainings in firearm safety and in, the social interactions that we want our police officers to have with their students in their buildings.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Question number 6, and we'll start with you, Allison. Do you think that the current 8th grade curriculum is pushing some students to take classes that might be above their ability? Would you like to see changes to the current policy or course offering?
So my experience as a teacher, along with extensive proven data, has taught me that differentiation in learning is the best way to set our students on a path towards success. I think right now we're seeing that lack of differentiation manifesting in the current issues surrounding the 8th grade curriculum. We need to prioritize that differentiation across the full spectrum, supporting both our highest achieving students and those who face learning challenges. In listening to parents of mainly middle school, upper middle school and high school students, they're really worried about this idea of a pressure cooker situation where our students are kind of being put into classes that maybe are too challenging for them, which leads to, issues surrounding mental health. And I think we just really need to find a balance between those two and kind of push our kids to, do the best that they can and be successful learners, but prioritizing things like their passions and their mental health.
Thank you. Lori?
I support the 8th grade curriculum because we've made it less high stakes than it was initially. I think that there were a lot of concerns around the balance between increased rigor, which a lot of parents ask for, especially at the middle level, and pushing our kids too hard before maybe they're ready. And what we've really been trying to do with the 8th grade curriculum is provide additional opportunities. So what we were hearing from a lot of parents is that if their kids hadn't taken the advanced courses at the middle level at 8th grade, then they didn't have the same opportunities when they got to the high school and through the high school program. And so what we've tried to do in moving the 2 Regents classes, the algebra class and the living environment class, down to the 8th grade level is make it so that any child, whether maybe they're an early high performer or maybe they're a late bloomer, they have the coursework behind them that they can then take whatever they want to take in high school, but that it's not on their high school transcript, that it's not necessarily going to impact them going forward. The other thing I want to make sure I say is that we are supporting all our learners, that each of our Regents classes on the 8th grade level has a co-taught classroom, so that every one of our students is being supported as they need and according to where they are, because the point of the IDEA is that our children be able to take the same classes as their grade level peers with the right support for each child.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. I think we certainly have to be cautious and very concerned with mental health. We know it is an issue facing so many of our students and so many of our children. And, you know, as we have requests from families for more rigor at the middle school level, we need to make sure that we're not normalizing excessive pressure and we're not normalizing an expectation that everyone has to go into that class. And that's a challenging thing to do. I think we need to really, as we implement these programs and as we add rigor to the middle school level, I think we need to make sure that we are really doing as really carefully monitoring and evaluating mental health indicators for our students at those levels so we can recognize and address issues before they become tragic.
Okay, Ryan, same question?
Yeah, so I also support the changes we've made to the 8th grade curriculum. I've had 2 students go through it, one who's a junior now and one that's an 8th grader now. And she's in a co-taught class because she needs extra support and she's doing fine. It matters to me because, again, I mentioned at the top that I'm a person that spends a lot of time talking with higher ed folks about what we need from high school graduates. And the fact is, we need students to get to pre-calculus at the very least to be a competitive college applicant. You can't do that if you don't take algebra in 8th grade. So we have to do it. We have to figure out a way to do it that supports all students. And we are doing that. Students who have IEPs, students who have 504 accommodations can all take that 8th grade class and do well. And we have the data to support that they learn more math in that class than they did in the prior arrangement that we used to have. So it's the right decision. Science, similarly, science students can get stacked up and feeling like they have to take multiple science courses in high school. You can take that burden off by taking biology in 8th grade and allowing students to smooth and spread out that experience and not have the pressure cooker that we already experience with some students by adding some of this rigor into the middle school experience. And the next step, of course, is to make sure that grades 5, 6, 7 build into that 8th grade curriculum in a way that feels smooth as well so that we're not overwhelming people with a big jump in 8th grade.
Okay, thank you, candidates. We'll now move to question number 7. And this one we will start with Hillary. With 2 key retirements coming up in the special ed department, are there any administrative changes you would like to see to more effectively serve the needs of special education students?
So I've been thinking about that a lot as I've been sitting on the interview committee for the new assistant superintendent of people personnel services. I think that special education is unique in that it's one of the departments that has both a curriculum and an operational side. Personally, I think we need to think of moving more of the curriculum piece of special education under this assistant superintendent for curriculum, because it's curriculum. Special education is education for some of our learners. It shouldn't be separated out. It shouldn't be in a different department. Curriculum is curriculum for all of our students. Some of our students have special needs. What's interesting is under federal law, gifted education is also considered special education. Whereas we don't have a gifted program necessarily in Chappaqua, it's interesting that we think of it that way, right? Like anything that is not your typical education is special education. It's not just our students who need more support. So I guess from a what would I change perspective, that's what I would change is I would make sure that all of our curriculum for all of our learners falls under the jurisdiction of our assistant superintendent for curriculum. That said, within this new position, there's the PPS position rather, there are still myriad departments that need to work together in terms of our counseling department, our special education department from the procedural standpoint of making sure that our IEPs run smoothly, our meetings run smoothly. Sorry, I could go on this a long time.
All right, thank you, Hillary. Tim, same question, 9 seconds.
Sure. What I'd like to see in special education is, again, more evaluation of our multi-tiered system of support. So certainly, we talk about our district has a lower classification rate than our neighbors, and we attribute it to the effectiveness of our multi-tiered system of support, but would like to see evaluation that those students are having outcomes that are as good as those that they would have if they had received a classification and been receiving services. As I think about, and hear from families regarding classification rate and the process for CSE, certainly the services provided are amazing, and it is essential that we take care of all of our students. But what I hear is that the process to actually initially seek an evaluation and receive an evaluation is onerous, is very challenging for families, especially as they are balancing working jobs, taking care of children. I'd like to see, again, an evaluation of how effective our district is at educating our families of the options that they have availability, those whose children may or may not need support, and the resources that we provide to ease that process for those families who need help.
Thank you. Ryan?
In my own professional work, my team and I are about to publish some research on how we can foster more inclusion in the workplace for people with disabilities, particularly people of color. And I'm very committed to this topic within the district. I want to make sure every student gets the education that they deserve and need. And it's really to Hillary's credit, and I want to acknowledge all the progress that's been made in the past few years to do the audit, to implement this new tiered support system. And I've got a chance as a board member to get to observe how these changes have been put into effect across the district, and it's really impressive to see more proactiveness on the part of the district to identify needs and address them earlier. And Tim is right that our classification rate is lower. My question to the district continues to be, is that because we're still holding our threshold too high, or is there more we could do to serve an additional layer of students who may have more needs? And I'm really looking forward to meeting the candidates for the new leadership of this area and discussing their vision, because it's really going to be up to them operationally to set the course forward for how the district's going to kind of raise its game even further and help more students.
Good, thank you. Allison?
So I think one thing that really needs to be looked at with this new administration is placing students outside of the district or declassifications. It's been stated that we have a lower percentage of students with IEPs than our neighboring districts, and I don't believe that's something to tout. I think it's an area that we really need to look at and see why that is. If we could reduce the out-of-district placements for these students by additional support staff, training, continue ed, so they could meet the needs of these students in their district, in their community, with their friends, their peers. That's one change I would like to see, as I've spent a majority of my career as a special education teacher in ICT classrooms. I strongly believe that that is the most effective way to do elementary and middle school special education. It's the most inclusive way. The consistency of having a full-time special education teacher in a classroom gives support not just to students with IEPs, but to all students. It's beneficial for the teachers and the community as a whole.
Okay, thank you, Allison. Question number 8, so I think we'll get to all 10. Good time. Question number 8, we'll start with you, Tim. How do you think the district should support students from diverse backgrounds who feel vulnerable or marginalized?
We always need to continually evaluate and iterate on our inclusion and belonging work. It's not enough to just implement a program and leave it. We need to be doing, whenever we implement a program, including inclusion belonging initiatives, there should be already at inception a planned evaluation timeline with measurements of performance and a timeline on when we're going to evaluate those to see if they are achieving our objectives. And our objective should be that the children who attend school in our district feel included and feel like they belong. I think another really important area, just as I think about my upbringing here, you know, what helped me feel connected was connections to my teachers as well. And I think in order for that to happen, we need to make sure that our teachers are not maxed out by increasing class sizes, by increased class load. They have to have certainly the time in their day and also the mental and emotional capacity in that day to connect with those students, especially if it is a student who is from a different background, who is not going to, you know, who may not feel that he is the same as others. So I would really like to evaluate our programs, make sure we're helping everyone feel like they belong, and make sure our teachers have the capacity to reach students and help them be part of our community.
Thank you, Tim. Ryan, we'll move over to you.
Yeah, would you mind reading it one more time, Ron?
Sure. How do you think the district should support students from diverse backgrounds who feel vulnerable or marginalized?
Well, every student who attends our schools deserves to feel like they belong in them. And at different points in the recent past, it's been our Black students, like my own adopted children, who sometimes felt like they didn't belong and they needed allies. Sometimes it's been our Asian students, if you recall the pandemic and how some of those families were treated. And lately it's been some of our Jewish and Muslim families who've expressed concerns, and they too need to be supported, both of them. I've had a chance to meet with those families. All they want is safety for their own kids, and they should get that. And so the district has to stand up for them and make sure that they feel included in everything that we do. One way to do that is continued professional learning for district staff. And so I'm pleased to know that both anti-Semitism and Islamophobia have been focal points for the district in this past year. And I imagine that will continue going forward. And it's tricky to do this work because we're in a policy environment where some of this work is being actively discouraged. We have to find a way through that. It's true in my own professional work as well. I've had grants canceled because they included certain terminology that we all want to see happen in the world, but nonetheless, those projects weren't allowed to continue. So we need to protect ourselves from any of that, those kind of attacks, while still continuing with the work going forward.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. Allison?
So when our students feel unheard and marginalized, it's the board's job to really listen. Every student should feel safe and supported at school. That, to me, and I'm sure to everyone here, is a complete non-negotiable. I think we need to be proactive. We need to teach our children not just to be high performers, but to be compassionate citizens who care about everybody in their community and in the world. I think the district has done a lot of great work around this. I think we can always look at where there needs to be more work by listening to the people that are speaking up, thoughtfully, coming to decisions together, and how we can make all of those students and families feel supported in the school and just in the community in general.
Thank you, Allison. Hillary?
The most important role of our schools, even before we educate our kids, is to make sure that they feel safe and celebrated for who they are when they walk into the doors of those buildings every day. Student sense of belonging is one of the pillars of our strategic plan, and our faculty sense of belonging is equally important to us. We want to make sure that everybody in our buildings, everyone in our school communities feels safe and like they belong in our community. Some programs that we've put in place to facilitate that are using the One Trusted Adult program. There's been pretty extensive PD for our teaching staff on the One Trusted Adult program, which is what it sounds like. It's forging connections to make sure that every child in every building has at least one adult to whom they feel connected and to whom they feel like they can turn to for help should they need that. The other thing I've had the opportunity to participate in with some of my fellow board members recently, and an array of our our community is to do narrative for storytelling facilitator training. And this is a program we're bringing to the district that we were actually introduced to by the PTA, I think about 2 years ago, through a speaker that they brought into the annual meeting. And it focuses on teaching our kids how to listen to each other, how to really be deep listeners and to hear each other's stories and to connect to each other in ways that they might not have thought they could connect, through learning about who their classmates are and what's important to them and how similar we all are.
Great, thank you, candidates. We'll go to question 9. And we'll start with you, Ryan. We could spend an entire forum talking about the issues around the Button Hook property. Do you think there are lessons to be learned from this situation for future board decision-making and community engagement?
So for those not up to date, since before I was on the board, the district has been working on what to do with a property known colloquially as Button Hook. And it's been stuck in litigation for the entire time I've been on the board. And it's tricky for those of us on the board to talk about this because anything we say could be used in the ongoing court case. So we need to kind of zoom out from that particular example. And one thing I've learned is districts shouldn't try to be real estate companies. Districts should not put a lot of energy and resource into trying to make property pass all of the environmental or other kind of permit constraints and limitations that are in place in order to carry out an endeavor like that, which was intended to bring more resources to the district. For those who aren't familiar with it, the idea was to put housing development into that space. So I think we gotta stay in our lane is probably the short answer to the question. And try to think of, there is an element of our strategic plan that's to look for new revenue sources. I'm not walking away from that as a goal, but doing it vis-a-vis challenging real estate situation is probably not the right way forward.
Thank you. Allison?
My friend Leslie will be very excited that this question was asked, because we weren't sure. So, like Ryan said, it's an issue that's in litigation, so there's not really much that can be done at this current moment. I think looking at it in a different lens, it talks about the transparency of, and obviously there are legal reasons that certain things can't be communicated. But I think a lot of the information that people get is, through Facebook or word of mouth or gossip. So I think that there needs to be a way that we can, as a board, can kind of communicate things like this that are going on with the community at large and really get their feedback through productive forums, not, gossip and hearsay.
Thank you. Lily?
So I am currently the longest serving board member, and this issue predates my tenure on the board. And I've only really been involved in it in sort of the trying to clean it up stage, so I want to be clear on that. But I think that the biggest lesson learned from it, honestly, as coming in as a board member that inherited this issue, and this is now my 3rd candidates forum, and I think the 3rd one I've had to talk about, a problem I did not create, is that boards should not go down paths that are gonna tangle future boards. That most, obviously we're gonna make decisions regarding education, regarding classrooms, regarding all of that are gonna have repercussions that future boards are gonna be dealing with, but in the educational domain, and that's what you expect, that's what boards are supposed to do. We as a board are actually very conscious of this. I think having been in the position of now dealing with this lawsuit and so many other issues concerning Button Hook, that we are very conscious of the decisions we make and the ramifications for future boards. And are we creating a situation that's going to be entangling or difficult for a future board to be able to act differently on if it's not something with which they continue to agree. So I guess for me, that's the biggest takeaway, is that we should be conscious as board members that we are custodians of the school board, that we sit on this board and in this role for, X number of years, but it's not a permanent position, and those who come after us will have to ultimately deal with the issues we create.
Thank you. Tim?
Yeah, I think it highlights and reinforces the importance of the board remaining at that strategic level where they're establishing values, establishing strategic educational objectives, and then evaluating the work of our district via our superintendent. From an as well also, I think it also, raises a question, it invites inquiry, I think, on the part of the board to examine the legal counsel we're receiving. I would wanna look at what legal counsel did we receive at the beginning of this. Was it sound? Was it not? Are we still using the same counsel? I would want to consider that. Or if we did receive, sound legal counsel, why didn't we act on it potentially in a sooner to avoid becoming entangled in this really unfortunate and reportedly really expensive, like hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, quagmire.
Tim. Now we'll move to our last question of the night, and Allison, we'll start with you. Given everything happening in the world, do you think the district should revisit its policies about inviting outside speakers or having parents come in to share experiences with students? How can we appropriately expose students to controversial topics?
So I believe the board and the district has started revising those policies. There are ones in place and then they're revising them, I think, to include parents coming into the building to teach, our kids about certain things. I think what we really need to do is plan ahead for the possibility of disruptions to these policies. How can we ensure that they're clear and communicated to everyone involved? Training staff in how to handle them in the fairest way possible in accordance with our neutrality policy. And when something slips through, that the administration at large understands how to mitigate the issue. I don't want to live in a world where we can't come into our children's schools and have nice things and, share our cultures with them. So I really think these new policies that are being created really need to reflect that idea that we are a community, we should support all of our students and families within it and, figure out how we can do that together.
Great, thank you, Allison. Hillary?
So 2 things are true. Our children must learn to engage in robust debate and to be able to listen to and respond to viewpoints with which they disagree. And our families should be included in our school communities. And even if both of those things are true, we still need to make sure that we are viewpoint neutral, apolitical entities as a public school district. So to that end, we've crafted a neutrality policy over the last year, and we have revisited and revised our policies concerning speakers in the school, both outside speakers and school events. And I think that is really the role of the board. Our role as the board and as board members is to look at our policies, to make sure that our policies guide the district in supporting the values that we have, which is encouraging families to be part of our school community and for all of our families to feel comfortable. There's a lot going on in the world right now, and I know that some of these policies have come to the forefront because of specific political issues, but you only have to open the newspaper to know there's a lot going on in the world that's going to impact our families from many different regions of the globe. And we are lucky to have a very diverse and global community. So we need to make sure that our schools are places where everybody can come in and every family can come in and feel that they are welcome and that their kids are celebrated and that we are a viewpoint neutral, apolitical entity as a public school district.
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah, as I've looked at this issue, I agree with the value that we want to engage our students, that we want them to be exposed, that we want our families to be able to participate in our school district. And while there's some, I'm sure policy gaps in looking at it that could be improved, what I think about as I look at this from an organizational perspective is, the ability then to translate from our values and policy to actual implementation in the school building. Looking at our International Day, it was an organizational failure where we had a policy that was supposed to govern how we address outside content and we didn't do it. And we should really I would like to see a thorough internal review of what happened, and not to scapegoat any of our staff or any of our people, but to look at it from that organizational lens of what about our organizational policies and structures essentially permitted this to happen so we can make changes. And I think a lot of it is really the really almost mundane organization work of oversight of board to superintendent, ensuring that our superintendent is effectively pushing these policies down, providing enough professional development for our staff and faculty to be able to implement the policies, and making sure we carve out enough time in their day for them to do it.
Okay, thank you, Ryan.
Yeah, I talked about this a bit at the top. I think the neutrality policy is super important, but we were one of the first districts to do something like that. And so we've got to come back and look at it and iterate over time. Most of the incidents that I think are probably driving the question are around parent behavior or adult or guest behavior in our spaces or on our campuses. When we put kids in charge of more of these issues and have them building content, sharing with each other, we don't have these issues. And so reworking days like International Day to the point where it's really faculty working with kids to share culture, background with each other. Parents can still be there and support. Let's not create the tricky back and forth that happens when parents are creating content and then you're putting the building leader in the position of having to vet that parent content and decide whether it's okay or not in a space. That feels uncomfortable to me. It didn't work here most recently. And so I hope we can come around to understanding that we let the students lead most of this work and sharing and have the parents be in a supporting and championing role when it comes to this kind of work going forward.
Right. So that ends the question period. And we'll now move to closing statements, and we'll go from right to left, starting with Tim, then Hillary, Allison, and Ryan. We have 90 seconds. Tim, are you ready?
Yep, Chappaqua is a special place, and I'm so glad that my wife and I moved here, returned to my hometown to raise our family. And we have a terrific school district. We have families who care deeply about their children, about their children's education, and about their children's futures. We have faculty who are passionate about education and about connecting with and inspiring our students. We need to make sure that they keep coming here. The strengths of our district have been developed over decades and decades of effort and investment. I think about organizations and maintaining long-term health of an organization. It's helpful to think about the internal and our external environment, how those are going to be changing, and how our organization can adapt to succeed in the future. An external pressure that we will be feeling, as we talked about, is budgetary if there is a reduction in state aid. Internally, what I hear from talking to so many stakeholders is that desire for more trust and more transparency in our processes and in our evaluation. So that everybody can trust that our district's processes are fair, neutral, and that they're aligned with our strategic objectives. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Hillary?
For the 6 years I've served on the BOE, I have always done my best to listen to people and serve as an honest conduit between district residents and the administration. I've always put honesty and integrity at the forefront of everything I do. You may disagree with me, but you're going to get my honest perspective and can count on that. I'm honored to share that the Commissioner's Advisory Panel on Special Education is seeking to add a school board member for the first time, and I've been recommended by the New York State School Boards Association to be that board member, contingent upon my re-election. Given my background, this is obviously something I'm excited about, but it would also be great for Chappaqua to have a voice on this panel. For any board to run at its best, there should be a diversity of expertise and experience, a mix of new ideas and institutional knowledge. If I am re-elected, I'll be the only board member who has served 2 full terms. Also, while I'm not someone who believes that boards need to be dominated by lawyers, I believe that in the current climate where the laws are changing daily on both the federal and state level, having a lawyer on the board, especially one with my expertise in education law, is important. I'm the only current board member or candidate with a legal background. Quite simply, experience and stability matter, especially right now. We have a very new board in Chappaqua right now. And I believe that we need to stay the course. We're in a good place. There's always room for improvement, but we do need stability right now. It has been an absolute privilege to have served 2 terms on this board. I hoped I have the opportunity to serve 1 more.
Thank you, Lori. Allison?
Thank you again to the League of Women Voters and to all of you watching and those watching at home. If you were a room full of first graders, I would have been way less nervous. No matter the outcome, thank you to my fellow candidates. No matter the outcome, it's been inspiring to see so many people passionate about our students and our community. Campaigning might be way outside of my comfort zone, but I've truly enjoyed listening to and learning from families, administrators, and board members. This process has deepened my understanding of the district and strengthened my pride in this remarkable community. If elected to the board, I would work on behalf of all community members, those with students in the district and those without. My focus will be on ensuring that every child feels safe, supported, and inspired to learn and grow. I'd be a responsible steward of district resources, committed to fiscal responsibility, while continuing to foster innovation, growth, and expand opportunities for all students. I will remain true to my belief that listening and asking questions can only help make our community stronger. Questions like, how can we help all students thrive? How can we retain and support our best educators? And how can we communicate more transparently and effectively with the community? With experience in communication, education, and years of PTA leadership, I'm ready to serve and help move the district forward. On a personal note, thank you to my husband and boys for giving me the support to step outside my comfort zone on this journey.
Thank you, Allison. Ryan?
Yeah, thanks again to the league for organizing us tonight and to everyone still tuned in at this hour. I'm curious how the related basketball game is going. I applaud your commitment to learning about all of us. My takeaway message is that we can talk about a lot of topics here. We did cover a lot of ground, but we have really no way of knowing what's going to happen in the next 3 years. So if you zoom out and you think about, well, who do you want on the board to handle whatever it is that comes up over the next 3 years? I hope that you'll value experience on the board, current active expertise in fields that are relevant to what matters to our students, whether that's law in Hillary's case or for me, what higher ed is looking for from our graduates. I know how strong our district is and I can help it get even better. And I've watched my own children and their friends grow up in this district over the last 10 years, so I know what families need at all the levels of our system. We have an increasingly globally connected world, presents more opportunities and challenges. I'm well prepared to help us navigate those together. And as Hillary said, we have a mix of veterans and new perspectives now, and we need that continuity and stability to keep us going to the next stage. It'd be a great privilege to continue to serve our schools as a school board member, and I want to thank you for considering supporting me with your vote on the 20th. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you. Thank you, candidates. Thank you, audience, those here and those at home. Thank you to the league. It's a lot of hard work to put these on. Thank you to the town facility. Thank you, Kira, Madison. And thanks, Freedom, back there. This forum was videotaped and will be available online beginning tomorrow. I want to remind you also of the unique and important role that the League of Women Voters plays here in the community and across Westchester, across the county, across the country. The League works to register voters, educate voters on issues of the day, both municipal governments and state government, county government, school boards, federal government. Protecting their right to vote is vital to the strength of our democracy. Your local league is made up of volunteers who devote their time and energy. I do not get paid. Your participation and assistance is always welcome, and your financial contributions would be appreciated. Remember, democracy is not a spectator sport. It's time to get out and vote next week, May 20th, 1 week from tomorrow. Polls are open from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. at Horace Greeley High School gym. And I encourage everyone to get out and vote. Thank you again, candidates. Good luck, and thank you again. Everyone have a wonderful evening. Good night.
It's the hardest thing.
So not.